Welcome to the AA Podcast, our little corner of the web where we are not afraid to discuss tough questions like,
when did nutrition, health, movement, and stress management become alternative medicine?
Where we embrace challenges in all aspects of life to become healthier and stronger versions of ourselves.
And where food and movement are the best kinds of medicine, and cooking meals at home is a revolutionary act. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the AA Podcast. This is Ashley Olson.
And I'm Andrea Crane.
We are excited to start we actually don't know how many series this is going to be because it is so in depth. And I think there's just so much information that we are wanting to share with you. And we also are really trying hard not to make these episodes super long because we understand that you guys are busy and have a life and need something quick and easy to listen to on your
Yeah.
drives and commutes.
And
So
yeah, truth be told, we wanging it. We just wanging it because
we have an outline.
I
We are
know
not just
we
like totally winging
we
it,
do well, yeah.
but we're gonna just see how long this episode goes, and we might break it up in a couple more episodes than we have originally planned. But
You
before we
are
do that,
welcome.
yes, before we do that, we are going to share our weekly Bible verse, and mine is coming from Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect.
All right, and mine is coming to you from Isaiah 26:3. You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. And so we both focused on the mind this week because little foreshadowing of what we'll be talking about, Ashley.
Absolutely. So, we are going to dive into neurological health. And this is becoming fairly popular, is maybe not the right word, but maybe it's becoming much more recognized as a serious
Mm,
concern
mm-hmm.
for our society. And we're seeing where neurological decline health is becoming much more common.
Right.
And it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily because we're more aware of what it is, or
Nope.
if it actually is becoming more
Yep.
um yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
and we're going to dive into like the reasons why we believe that is happening, probably not in this episode, but um or maybe we will. I don't know. But
Let's just see where it
we
goes.
we are just going to allow this to
Yeah.
conversation to unfold. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and I just wanted to put a plug in there first for so yeah, we're going to be talking about cognition. How brain health is one of those kind of pet topics for me, like autoimmunity is. But there's just, what do you have if you don't have your mind?
Mhm.
That's, I know that physical health is up there too, but I feel like we've kind of gotten the message about physical health, but cognitive health, I still feel like we struggle with this.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to put it out there, just to reiterate kind of functional medicines. And guys, I apologize, my voice is a little scratchy. I'm recovering still from a virus that came through my house, and so feeling much better, but my voice is still kind of struggling. But yeah, just the whole functional medicine idea, and I always tell patients, we like to square the curve, right? Like, functional medicine is not going to make you live forever,
Mhm.
um, but what we seek to do is square the curve, meaning, by the time you turn 40, by the time you turn 50, it's not just this slow death march into this into decline, right? It's like you live, you live, you're in great health, your brain is firing on all cylinders, and then all of a sudden, you're 87, you're 92, and you just die. So that's kind of what we're after, is just
Mhm.
maintenance of that incredible state of vitality and health until you don't have it anymore, and then you go quickly.
Mhm.
That's really the goal, because who wants to malinger?
Yeah. I
So,
mean, not only just for yourself, but those
mhm.
around you too.
Oh, of course, of course. And so, yeah, and it's not just from the neck down. It's not just
Mhm.
physiology, but it's also cognitive health. How do we protect that brain function?
Absolutely. And I think we're going to be getting into like well, not in this episode, but we are going to get into like the lifestyle and
Mhm.
nutrition part of what we can do to help
Oh, yeah,
mitigate some of these cognitive issues that we are seeing.
right.
Andrea, what would you say? Well, is the basic definition of neurological health? What would you say that is?
Well, and we can kind of divide the brain into the physiology of the brain, and we can divide it further into like cognition. And so if we it's weird, but the electrical impulses that serve our musculature, right? That move us around, that control our breathing and our blood pressure and our heart rate and things like that. I kind of separate those from the mind. And the mind, to me, encompasses thoughts and feelings and the ability to problem solve, and just that spark that makes us human, because all animals can ambulate themselves around to one degree or another, right? And
Mhm.
but humans, we have this ability to think and to wonder, and the things that make us uniquely human. And so I think today we're going to be focusing on the mind. And
Yes.
so cognitive function is really where we're going to be focusing today, and where we'll focus the next at least one episode, maybe two, so just depending on
Yeah.
how long we ramble here.
So it's no surprise when you hear somebody, in their 70s, 80s,
Hmm.
sometimes even their 60s,
Oh, yeah.
and saying like, "Oh no, yeah, my dad or my grandpa has dementia, or
Hmm.
he's now developing Alzheimer's disease."
Yeah.
Um, so, what um, what are kind of those I guess signs of first signs of dementia or Alzheimer's?
Well, let's see. I want to mention incidence and prevalence first, just so that
Okay.
people know how common this is. Because you're
Yes.
right, we do. I mean, all the time we've got people in their 60s, which, holy cow, is that becoming younger and younger to me personally.
Yes.
That's hitting close, and so yeah, it's like, what do you mean they're 64 and they have dementia? That's crazy.
Mhm.
So yeah, the numbers that I found, and these are well over a decade old, because they come from epidemiological data, they come from metadata from other studies, they come from retrospective analyses of giant studies, and these things cost millions of dollars to put together. It costs a lot of money to get this huge um, amounts of aggregate data. So people that comb through these things, they're often 10, 15 years behind. And that is the case with incidence and prevalence data for things like dementia. So the data that I found is it's as high as 13.7, so nearly 14% of all people over 70 have dementia of one form or another. So
That is scary.
it is very scary. And now we're gonna break up the different types of dementia next, but all forms of dementia, it could be 14 out of 100 people, or 1.4 people out of 10, right? So that's ugh, yeah. Anyway.
It'd also be super interesting, and I doubt there's super great studies on how technology and social
Hmm.
media has played
Hmm.
into all of this as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting because I know there's a huge, and we're not going to get into this so much today, but I will just mention it briefly here. The depths and uh, the number of connections, like social connections that you have, is also very closely correlated to your cognitive health. So, if you have deep relationships and if you have a number of relationships in your life, and so yeah, I think some of the changes that we've seen because of social media, yes, it can be very isolating because people don't have real analog relationships, right? Everything is on this digital platform. However, I think a case could be made. For instance, I just got reconnected with my little graduating high school class in Parsons, Kansas. Now, I didn't graduate from there, but I grew up with these folks and they remember me and I absolutely remember all of them. And so, that was an incredible thing that would not have been possible were it not for some of these digital platforms. So I think a case can be made for both as long as it's used responsibly and not to the
Yeah.
exclusion of like analog relationships, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I also wanted to say, so let's go down an age bracket. Let's get to 65, which again is getting uncomfortably close. Up to 10% of all of the people over 65 have some form of dementia.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah,
So
shocking.
dementia is kind of like the hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can break it into types, which is,
Yeah.
the one that we're all very familiar with is Alzheimer's disease. What
Mm-hmm.
are some of the characteristics that we're seeing with the Alzheimer's disease?
Well, so that is so in coming to distinguish the different types of dementia, yeah, it pays to recognize what are those herald signs? What are those initial signs that we see? So with Alzheimer's disease, it's primarily those memory things. Like they're not at your fingertips, right? They find it difficult to go back and pull up memories. Okay, and sometimes this occurs more commonly with short-term memories than it does with long-term memories, but eventually the long ones go as well. um, and we also see that with Alzheimer's in particular, it's a slow onset and generally a gradual decline. So it's not some sudden event where you can say, "Oh, on this day, this is when my loved one started to like had a massive decline in cognition." No, this is a long, slow descent into impairment. Now there are certainly and here I'll give you a bit of a defining factor here. If really significant disability occurs within 2 years, that is considered a rapid onset
Okay.
dementia. Okay, so that's what defines a rapid onset. But most of the time, we're talking about this slow over the course of many years, a decline into that cognitive impairment. Um, and so back to the first thing that goes is that memory, right? The accessibility of those memories. um then a late feature of Alzheimer's is executive functioning, so things like problem solving and brain processing speed. Okay, so those are late things to go. Now, the next type of dementia I'll talk about, they're sort of flipped. Okay,
Mm.
so that's one way that we can tell the difference between the two. And another distinguishing factor about Alzheimer's disease is that it is largely independent of vascular and cardiac risk factors. So, if someone's got uncontrolled high blood pressure, if someone has stroke, pulmonary emboli, things like that, Alzheimer's is kind of independent of those pathologies. Okay. Um, and we're gosh, I can't wait to get to some of the things that I want to talk about with Alzheimer's, about what we know about the etiology of it. Our knowledge is definitely evolving. Okay, I'm gonna yeah, we won't talk about it quite yet. Not gonna go there, not gonna
As
go
you
there
can
yet.
tell, Andrea
Ah.
is not firing on all four cylinders.
I know, I know. I had a few days where I was down there, but yeah, got the mushrooms going. I'll be back. I'll be back
Yep.
by next week.
Which we are going to talk about that.
I know. It's another thing I want to talk about, but we
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
yet.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we have Alzheimer's. So
Yep, yep,
that's like a primarily the memory loss. Then the
yep.
slow. It's a slow, gradual decline.
Mhm.
And then you got the executive functions, problem
Mhm.
solving, processing, whatever. Um, and you're saying that one is primarily uh
Not correlated with
not
the
correlated
vascular.
with the
Yeah.
vascular or cardiac risks.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but now we have what's called vascular dementia, which I actually had
Yes.
never heard of.
Yeah, so this is a form of dementia. So think about this. Think about all of the conditions that, think about all the chronic disease states that lead to a lack of oxygenation. All
Yeah,
right. So thinking about things like uncontrolled sleep apnea. All right. Think about things like high blood pressure.
yeah.
Okay.
Which plug for
Um,
our sleep episode because we talk about
you
the
betcha.
importance of sleep and
Mm-hmm.
why do not let if you have trouble sleeping and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying all the things, get a sleep
Yeah.
study.
That's right. That's right. They can do
Hmm.
them in your house now.
Yeah.
So no excuse. So vascular dementia. Also, if you have a propensity for clotting, if you have had issues with like pulmonary emboli, deep vein thrombosis, um, if you have AFib, that puts you at an increased risk for clotting, which puts you at an increased risk for vascular dementia. Okay, so anything that can cause an interruption in the blood flow, that is going to be a problem. And so, characteristics, you'll find people with vascular dementia, they will present with things like stroke like episodes, right? So, TIAs. Frequently, patients will have stroke like symptoms that will then completely resolve, and they'll go into the ER and they'll get this huge neurological workup. They'll get the CT scan, they'll get all of this care, and they'll say, well, on the CT we didn't find any episode of hemorrhage, and we didn't find any evidence of emboli or clot, and so, well, I guess it was just a TIA. So that's a transient ischemic episode, or a transient ischemic um, event. Okay, and so, this these mini strokes, and people call them mini strokes, and I guess that's kind of what they are. It's a bit of an oversimplification, but these events can also lead to vascular dementia. All right, so vascular dementia begins with slowed thinking and processing speed. Okay, so we talked about Alzheimer's having those executive functions lost later on in the course of the disease. But for vascular dementia, that is the early sign, is that, they can't solve puzzles, they can't do problem solving. Their processing speed of their brains slows down. All right, and then you can get the memory impairment later on. um and then the onset of disability is also can be different with vascular dementia. It can be slow and steady, right? Because if someone has uncontrolled hypertension, if someone has yeah, we'll talk about blood glucose later, but if they have uncontrolled diabetes, if they have uncontrolled ischemic disease, then they can have this slow gradual decline just like Alzheimer's, or they can have these sudden stroke like episodes that lead to sudden disability. Now, these folks, cardiac history and cardiac risk factors and vascular risk factors, these are all part of vascular dementia. So they are absolutely related to having a cardiac history and or sudden risk factors. Okay. Um, and then let's see. Let's just put it in a nutshell. Let's just put those comorbid conditions in a nutshell. So if someone has high blood pressure, if they have diabetes, if they smoke, if they have untreated cardiac arrhythmias like AFib, that puts you at a higher risk for developing vascular dementia. Now, a lot of people will put cholesterol in this picture too. In fact, all the literature that you'll read will put cholesterol in this list. However, I submit there's more to the cholesterol picture.
I
We're still
agree.
puzzling it out. We're still puzzling it out. And so
Mhm.
I think the link is fuzzy. Um, there are some parallels that can be drawn. Um, did that dog just put her paw in your mouth?
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
What a nut.
But she is
Um,
standing on my shoulder.
yeah, she is. Okay. So yeah. Anyway, those are the comorbids. Cholesterol, we're still trying to figure it out. Now also I just want to bring up, so those are the two major types of dementia that we see. And Alzheimer's is by far the most common form of dementia. Vascular dementia is a distant second. And then we've got things like there's Parkinson's dementia, not the same as Parkinson's disease, but they can exist together. Um,
Okay.
and then we've got Lewy body dementia.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
And
So Lewy
Parkinson's.
body disease is that similar? Like, so Parkinson's disease is different than Parkinson's dementia, and Lewy body's disease is, or am I?
There is a dementia that goes along with Parkinson's, and Lewy bodies do figure in to that disease. However, there's also a Lewy body dementia that is different.
Okay.
And so, you can distinguish that upon like neurological imaging and probably autopsy it would take to distinguish. So it's really a difference, a distinction without a difference when it comes to just what's going on with your loved one. Who cares?
Yeah.
But those are two more types. There are other smaller categories of dementia um,
But
that
those
are
are like
less
the main
common.
ones.
Yeah, but these are the main ones.
Okay.
Okay.
So what things that what are some of the things that are linked to dementia?
Well, we talked about some of them. So we've talked
Yeah.
about some disease states if they're out of control, but let's take a deeper dive into some of those things that we see that really increase our risk for dementia. So one, the elephant in the room are those risk factors for which you can do nothing. So things like your genetics. There's nothing you can do about your genetics. But the genetic picture is not your destiny. And I tell patients this all the time. Your genes are not your destiny. So regardless of what your grandparents had, what your parents had, even what your siblings have going on, your genes are not your destiny. So that's a really, really important point to hear, is that even though you can't do anything about your genetics, there are plenty of other modifiable risk factors that you can do something about. You also can't do anything about your gender. If you're born female, you're at a higher risk of developing dementia. And so
Yes.
yeah, that I know that's just an unmodifiable risk factor. And as well, there are some racial inequalities when it comes to development of dementia as well. And you can't do anything about that. However, there is a plethora of things that you can do something about. So
Yeah.
the first one I want to talk about, hear me well, untreated hearing loss. That's funny. That's funny.
Hear he, hear ye.
What? Um, that yeah, untreated I'm sorry, untreated hearing loss, that's huge. So there are so many studies on this, there's so much data on this that when you've got people that and I don't know why people are so stubborn about hearing loss, but they don't want to get hearing aids. And what ends up happening is that as people are removed from conversations, as they're removed from that social stimulus, there are parts of their brains that shut down and it leads to dementia
Yeah. So I was before you said that, I was like, I wonder if there is a higher level of dementia
in
in
males.
deaf, well, no, in
Oh,
deaf people,
oh,
but
I
they
don't
still have
think
the
so. Right.
reading of the lips and the sign language. So there's
Yeah,
probably maybe not
and
a correlation.
so the deaf community is really, really interesting. Deaf people are extremely proud of their community, of their, the ways that they have to communicate, of their language. They have a
Hmm.
really, really rich heritage and rich, deep social connections. So I would not think so. I would
Yeah,
not think so.
that makes
In fact,
sense.
there's a large contingent of deaf people that would not choose to trade to be hearing. And so, yeah, I think that there are really rich and deep social connections there that more than make up for, a lack of hearing. Now, but for people who have been hearing and then lose it over the course of time, and I was gonna say, I'm sure that this is worse in men. It seems like men really, really struggle with, not wanting to go in, not wanting to get their hearing checked.
Hmm.
And so, if you've noticed that there's a person in your life as they age, generally, this is as you enter that sixth decade, seventh decade, that they're kind of withdrawing from conversation. It very well could be because they can't hear and they don't want to, they're having trouble distinguishing ambient noise from the conversation at hand. And so that becomes problematic, and so they just start to withdraw. And after they withdraw, um they find it they will start to lose areas of their brain development. So
That
yeah,
makes total
the
sense.
cognitive impairment follows.
Yeah.
Now, the next thing I want to talk about is sleep.
Yes.
Um, Poor sleep is linked to dementia. I mean, this is a fact. It is a fact. It is a well-studied fact.
Which is so crazy that
Mm-hmm.
sleep plays such a vital role in so
Mm-hmm.
many areas of our life, and
Right.
yet it's kind of passed off as, oh, it's okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's okay if you have poor sleep. Like that's just probably normal.
Right.
Or it's not that serious. But what the studies
Mm.
have shown is how serious it really is.
Oh yeah.
So I don't
Sleep
know if
is
it's
huge.
because there's so much are so many people that deal with sleep, and so they're trying to downplay it. I don't know why. if- I feel like it's downplayed, but
Yeah.
I think it's becoming more. It's being talked
Mm.
about more as being so important in the
Mm-hmm.
health and fitness world for sure. I don't know
Yeah.
if in like everybody's day to day life if it's becoming as talked about.
Yeah, I feel like in the functional world, it's always kind of been at the forefront because there are just so many executive functions that occur at night. So, taking memories, for example, putting them from, there are unstable memories, and you want to move them to a position of stability where they're accessible. Right. So it's almost like having a file in your brain that you learned that day. Well, it's at nighttime when you're sleeping that that file is put into a place where it can be retrieved, right? It goes into a permanent location rather than this sort of unstable, ethereal piece of knowledge that you may or may not be able to hang on to. So, yeah, critical for learning.
Yeah,
And yeah, so the next one that I wanted to talk about was maintaining a healthy weight. That is huge. And that's huge for a lot of reasons. And I don't think we fully elucidated all of those reasons, but here's what I'll submit as one of my guesses. One, there is there is estrogen that comes from adipose tissue. And we
Yeah.
know that excess estrogen is not good for the brain, not good for cognition. However, the flip side of that is it's very much a Goldilocks hormone, because
Mhm.
having too little estrogen, you can't think either. So
Yeah.
it's got to be, yeah, I'm here to prove that. It's got to be in range. Dude. Yeah, that
That's a
oh
whole
my
other
gosh.
episode we are
Yes, it
planning on.
is. Oh, hormones. We gotta do some work on hormones here.
Oh gosh.
But
I
yeah.
thought Andrea was gonna fly
Mhm.
off the rails.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm doing better. I'm doing better. I'm oh yeah, so no one has died. Everyone is okay here. Everyone is okay. Um
Oh.
so
Yeah, no,
anyway,
movement is super
yeah.
important. I mean,
Yeah,
well,
that's
we're
the
going to talk
next
about
one.
movement, but
Mhm.
I mean, going along with a healthy weight is movement,
Right.
right?
Yes.
But there are so many insanely crazy studies on exercise and the brain
Mhm.
health
Yeah.
out there,
Yeah.
and we'll probably dive deeper into those as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
along with all the other health benefits of having a healthy body weight, I mean, there's just, I mean, it's kind of going along with sleep. It's like you need sleep, you need to have a healthy body weight because it plays a role in so many other functions of the body, not
Mhm.
just the brain.
Right. And the cool thing about movement is that it will help you um it will help you at all points along your journey. So whether you're in
Hmm.
your second decade or your seventh decade, movement will help your brain.
Yes.
Um
Yeah.
Now, let's see. I tell you what, Ashley, we're at 30 minutes. So let's mention one more, and
Okay.
then let's table this till next week.
Okay. Yeah, that
Okay?
sounds good.
It's because I've got a pretty long list here. So let's
Yeah.
go for alcohol use.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's correlated. Gosh, it's correlated to the increasing prevalence of dementia. So, alcohol use in any form, in any volume, is correlated to dementia. So, it's just, data after data after data. And again, not against alcohol use, just informed consent.
Right.
So
Yeah.
just know what you're doing. Know what you're
Hmm.
doing. I mean, there are things that I choose to eat that have absolutely zero nutritive value whatsoever, but I do it with full knowledge of what I'm doing, right? Like I don't know, I had some really weird piece of candy that Gavin had the other day. It was just a monstrosity, but it was something that I'd never seen or had before. So I had a little piece of it, and I know it is full of dyes, it is full of sucrose, it's full of all kinds of stuff in there. But
Yeah.
I tried it. It was gross. It's
Yeah.
fine. Just
But
be
it's in the
informed.
grand scheme of things. I mean,
Exactly.
you have to live a little life, but at the same time, like understand like these things,
Yeah,
especially in excess, can
exactly.
be detrimental.
Yes, precisely. Yes,
Hmm.
precisely. Okay. So we've reached, I feel, a good point. We're going to continue on with our list of lifestyle and modifiable factors that relate to dementia when we come back on the next episode.
Yeah, we want to keep these episodes short for a reason because we want to one, you want to be able to listen to the whole thing and digest everything. But I think this is a really important topic, so I'm excited to continue this on our next episode. But yeah, we'll like we said, we don't know how many parts this is going to be. This might be like a 6-part series. Who knows?
16 parts.
This might be our next year
I
podcast. We have no
know.
idea. But
Oh,
we will continue on this next week. But thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions or if you have um any thoughts on the matter, we
yes.
would love to hear from you. So, but
Yes.
as always, thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Bye. The content provided in the AA podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical advice.